Hello, I'm Sarah Grady Ackerman. Stephen Kampa is the 2011 Florida Book Awards Gold Medalist in the poetry category. His collection, titled Cracks in the Invisible, has been described as a witty combination of comedy and tragedy in the pursuit of an intelligent modern faith. Stephen Kampa joins us now, and thanks so much for being here, Stephen, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Now, you're a Florida native, raised in Daytona Beach, correct?
I am, yes, ma'am.
So what does it mean to you to have this honor to be recognized by the Florida Book Awards?
You know, I think one of the things that's most important to me is that poetry is not as read as it could be, both across the country and in the state in particular, perhaps. And it's good to get the recognition for poetry, any poetry, not just mine, to bring it to people's attention and remind them that it is still being written, that it's being written by hopefully young people. I hope I'm still young.
Yeah.
And that there's just an entire world of writing out there that a lot of people don't get much experience with after, say, high school. And so to have a book brought to the fore that way is really an honor for me, but hopefully a way to promote poetry in general.
What is it that you appreciate and enjoy about writing poetry? Yeah,
I think that poetry pays attention to language in more than one way. It asks us to remember that language is historical, and so that a poet pays attention to etymologies, where words come from. A poet pays attention to the connotations of words in ways that maybe, say, a speechwriter wouldn't pay attention to in the same way.
Right.
Poetry is asking us to give language the attention that it deserves as one of the most distinct aspects of being human, right?
Wow.
That what sets us apart in a way is our ability to communicate with nuance and intensity, and poetry does that. And so I'm glad that I get to fiddle with words all day.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good way to write.
I like the way that you put that.
Thank you.
So I know this is going to be kind of hard because you have 33 poems and Cracks in the Invisible, but can you kind of give us an overview of what's inside those?
Yeah, a lot of the poems are my attempt to think about faith. I was raised in the church, you know, church-going kid, and for some people maybe that never becomes difficult. For me, it has become more and more difficult to think about what it means to be a faithful person in the world that we live in. And so the book in general, although it might take a lot of different approaches, it keeps asking that question: what does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to pray and maybe not hear back the voice you were hoping to hear? And so I might envision the book as having an arc from a kind of childhood faith and a certainty that things are going to be okay, moving into territory of uncertainty, but that I'm not sure other readers would see that. That's just how it looks to me.
That's really interesting. So really there's a diversity of topics, and I'm just understanding now where that comes from. Just, you know, you kind of touched on this, but where does your inspiration come from? Yeah,
I think that poetry can come from a lot of places, and for me sometimes it's an argument I'm having with myself, sometimes it's a movie I saw or a book I read. I've got a couple of poems about movies because I keep thinking to myself, if I'm going to indulge in watching an hour and a half of movie, I better get something out of it, and for me sometimes that's a poem. Sometimes poems come out of experiences, sometimes they just begin with noticing something in the language, a pun that you want to make, a word play that is so enticing you can't not write that poem. But a lot of times I think we turn to poetry, or at least I do in writing, because I have some problem, or I have some question, or I have something that's bugging me that I have to think about, and for me I think about it on the page.
And so sometimes you just may be sitting there, and then out of nowhere a thought comes up, and you
Seamus Heaney, who's a very good poet, an Irish poet, calls it the done, the thing that you were just given, you can't explain where it comes from. And the trick to being a writer, I think, is taking the done and making something out of it, because we all have good ideas, and sometimes we turn them into jokes, sometimes we turn them into visual art or songs, or sometimes it's just something we say at the end of the day, honey, you'll never believe what I thought of today. But for a writer, that moment becomes a story or a poem or a novel.
Well, you said at the beginning, I'm kind of new at this. So, what does it mean? I mean, you received the gold medal from the Florida Book Awards. How does that feel?
It feels excellent. I feel very privileged, and I think you know, a lot of writers feel that they work in obscurity, or that you can't really hope to get any kind of recognition because, for whatever reason, whether it be because you don't get your work out there, because your work is published by a small press. You know, for me, I'm very new to all of this, and I come from a fairly small town, and to have an entire state take notice of my work is really surprising and wonderful. It's nothing I would have expected.
Well, that's wonderful. Thanks so much for joining us, and again, congratulations.
Thank you. My pleasure.
The Florida Book Awards are presented annually to recognize, honor, and celebrate the best Florida literature. The program is coordinated by the Florida State University Libraries and co-sponsored by these groups that promote books by and for all Floridians.